Welcome all to the Department of Energy's SBIR, STTR Programs Office webinar. My name is Chris O'Gwyn. I am with the DOE SBIR Programs Office, and I will be moderating today's webinar. First off, let me just mention that following today's presentation, you will be presented with an opportunity to comment on today's presentation. So at that time, we encourage you to please take a moment to let us know what you think and to give us any ideas on how we can better inform you and provide you with the assistance that you might need prior to submitting an application. Okay, so today's presenter is the DOE SBIR STTR Programs Director, Dr. Manny Oliver. Manny will provide you with a brief overview of the federal SBIR STTR programs, DOE's SBIR technology areas, and the general DOE application and award process as it relates to this fiscal year 14 Phase 1 Release 1 funding opportunity announcement. We'll conclude with a question and answer session. Using many of the questions that you submitted during registration, Manny has also worked some of those questions into the presentation, and also during the course of this webinar, go ahead and submit your questions via the text chat box that you will find on your screen there. And I will present those to Manny, and he will address these as time permits. If you have a question relating to either the topics or to the actual technical content of your proposal, please submit those directly to the topic manager that is listed with the topic or subtopic in the fiscal year 14 Release 1 Topics document. And you can find that topics document on the DOE SBIR website. And lastly, all those who have registered for this, whether you're on the webinar at the moment or whether you're not, you will receive an email from me with a copy of the PowerPoint slides, today's PowerPoint slides, and the recorded webinar link following today's presentation. We'll also post this recorded webinar on our website probably on Monday, so you can find it there as well. So let's turn this on over to Manny. Manny?
All right, thanks, Chris, and welcome everybody. We do have a sort of a busy agenda here, a lot to cover, so I'll go through that. I'll start by saying that it looks like the majority of you are new to the DOE SBIR program. So again, this presentation is really designed for those who are looking to apply perhaps for the first time. So we'll go through some of the very basic information. I know we probably have some people who have applied before who may be coming through and wondering what's really changed year to year. So I would just say over the past couple of years we have made a number of changes, and this year actually there will not be very many changes to the program. So there won't be a whole lot of new information this year compared to the past years, but a lot of the changes we did make over the past couple of years, we will highlight those as well. So let me go to the next slide. Again, so these federal programs, the first section is really going to talk across the whole federal government, because the SBIR and STTR programs are not just at the Department of Energy, but many other agencies. So in terms of their original purpose, you can see some of the statements from the original legislation here to the charter of these programs. But basically it comes down to is really involving small businesses in innovation that's going on in federal R&D. So we do want to tap into the creativity that's out there. Over time, the R&D needs, both sort of basic and applied, were used for the SBIR programs. But over time, there's been greater emphasis on commercialization of the results from the SBIR and STTR awards. So many of the programs do evaluate and look at in your applications what is the commercial potential for the R&D that you're proposing. In terms of how to look at the funding that we provide, we are really focused on early stage R&D, starting with the initial idea and trying to move it to prototype. So it's often referred to as seed capital to get started with new ideas. So it's actually a very good fit for small businesses, and particularly startup businesses who are trying to start a company with a new research idea. Next. In terms of how the program is operated, the Small Business Administration is actually the administrator, and they oversee the entire program and issue policy as well as reports to Congress on the progress with it. Individual agencies actually run the program. So There are two programs, SBIR, which is the Small Business Innovation Research, and for DOE the first year of that was in 1983. For this year, 2.8% of our extramural R&D budget will go into the program. For us, for 14, that should be approximately $180 million. And there are 11 different agencies that do participate in the SBIR program, and you can see them listed here. Apologize for the list of acronyms. I do have the full list on the next page. The STTR program, Small Business Tech Transfer, the main difference here is it does require you to collaborate with a nonprofit research institution, such as a university or a federal lab. And you can see the percentage there is smaller, so this is a smaller program in terms of funding compared to the SBIR program. And this was started about 10 years after the SBIR program. And there are only 5 agencies that participate in STTR. In terms of the overall budgets, in total across the federal government, there's almost $2.5 billion that go toward these programs. So it's a very large program and a very good source, of funding for small businesses. As you can see here, the Department of Defense, National Institutes of Health, combined are about 3/4 of the program. DOE, Department of Energy, represents about 7%, and there, again, I show our budget. This is for 2012, approximately almost $190 million. I will just say, while we're talking about budgets, we do get questions about that were submitted online about sequestration and what's the impact of those things on the programs. And of course, there is some reduction in funding as the R&D budgets of the federal government go down. However, at the same time, the percentage of our budgets that are being allocated toward SBIR and STTR are going up. So on the previous page, I mentioned we had 2.8% and 0.4% of the budgets for fiscal year 14 going to these programs. Last year, those numbers were 2.7% and 0.35%. So combined with the percentages going up and the budgets maybe going down, we are staying relatively level in terms of the amount of funding. Now, one of the key things about the program is the eligibility, because it is limited to small businesses. And it's even a little more specific in terms of the ownership. So there's a requirement that it be at least 51% U.S. owned. There's a limit on the number of employees that defines a small business, so 500 or fewer employees. The other thing you should know is that the principal investigator, when you submit the grant, must be an employee of the small business for the SBIR program. Because the STTR program is done in conjunction with a research institution, for that program, the principal investigator may come from the research institution, but only for the STTR. One of the other questions that was submitted in advance with reauthorization of the SBIR programs, it did allow agencies to have small businesses that are majority owned by multiple venture capital, hedge fund, or private equity firms to apply to these programs. The Department of Energy has chosen not to use that authority, and so we are still open only to the small businesses under the previous ownership guidelines. More details about the ownership guidelines are in the funding opportunity announcement, so we encourage you to review that and certainly contact us if you have any questions about that. The other key thing about the program is the phased R&D approach. So you won't be applying typically for 2 or 3 years of money in advance. So all the programs use a phase 1. They can be anywhere from 6 to 12 months in length. And typically, this is really the idea stage where you're trying to establish feasibility of your idea. And the funding amounts typically are on the order of $150,000 across all the agencies. At that point, you would actually submit an application to proceed to phase 2, where you get into a much longer term and a higher budget, 2 years, $1 million being typical for prototype development. And finally, we refer to phase 3 as really the funding that you get after completing phases 1 and 2 in terms of driving the technology to commercialization. That may be funded by more typically provided by the private sector, and some federal agencies also supply some additional phase 3 money. the budgets that I showed on the previous page were really just the monies that go into Phase 1 and Phase 2. On the next slide, there are three important, I think, things that we get questions about of these programs. And the first one is cost sharing. And so across the federal government, there is no cost sharing required for SBIR and STTR grants. And many other sources of federal funding may require cost sharing from businesses. So this is actually a fairly important feature of the programs. We also get questions about patent rights. So the R&D that you do under these grants, the small business can apply and file for patent rights. The government does retain what's referred to as government use rights. So the government is not going to license that to somebody else, for commercial applications. Those are really, you're free to do that. It just retains these rights just in case the government actually needs to use the invention. You may end up being very successful doing what you do and may only want to focus on the private markets for it. If the government has a need because it did pay for the R&D that contributed to the invention, it does retain this right to use it for government needs. And finally, data protection. Some of you have, novel ideas that you don't want shared publicly. And so we would indicate that the data you generate from your R&D is protected for a minimum of 4 years, after the conclusion of your award. And that period of protection actually extends. If you do continue to work on the R&D beyond your grant period, we will protect it for 4 years beyond the time at which you stop working on it. Okay, in the next section, we're going to actually talk about specifically about the DOE programs and the technology areas that we are interested in. Even though there are many programs across the federal government, each of them, has a different. Each of the agencies has a different mission, and therefore the types of technology innovations they fund will differ. So in the Department of Energy, we have three primary areas that we work on. The first is in clean energy, and I think this is the technology areas that we're known best for. The second is actually in terms of advancing science, and particularly basic science in the United States. And that is actually a very large part of the DOE program. And finally, we do have a strong nuclear security program because DOE does make the nuclear weapons that are used by the Department of Defense. So we are involved in not only the production, but also concerned about non-proliferation and environmental efforts to clean up previous weapon sites. Okay, on the next slide, unfortunately this is a little bit complicated and a bit of an eye chart, but I just wanted to somewhat show you how the Department of Energy is organized and all the different programs that participate in SBIR and STTR. So starting on the left side of the chart there in red, the nuclear security part of the agency, we have a defense nuclear nonproliferation. In the middle of the chart, we have what's called the Office of Science and Energy, and the department was recently reorganized, and so making this a little more challenging. One office there is the Office of Science, and within the Office of Science we have 6 different program offices. Again, the Office of Science is about 2/3 of the DOE SBIR program. In addition to the Office of Science, we have 4 applied programs. There's fossil energy, energy efficiency and renewable energy, nuclear energy, and finally electricity delivery and energy reliability, which you can think of as the smart grid. And finally, we have one smaller program called environmental management, mainly involved with nuclear cleanup activities. On the far right, I did want to mention that although most of the programs throughout DOE participate in the program that I'm describing today, there is a separate SBIR and STTR programs operated by ARPA-E. ARPA-E is the Advanced Research Projects Agency Energy, and similar to the DARPA program in DOD. So they're looking at very high-risk, transformational projects. And you can apply, what I'm going to cover today, again, applies to the other 12 offices I'm showing here. But if you wish to apply to ARPA-E, that is a separate program, and you can contact them for the details of how to apply to their programs. They are much smaller. I think their budget for this year will be approximately $7 million, and as I mentioned before, our budget will be on the order of $175 million for the larger program here. On the next slide, I just want to familiarize you with how our programs operate. And there are three sort of organizations you will deal with. One is our office, which is the box in the bottom there. And this is kind of the administrative office for the program. So we will develop the funding opportunity announcements that you're looking at, administer the review and selection process, and also do other activities such as conducting outreach. So we'll be here to answer most of your questions. We're going to point out that we work with those different program offices throughout DOE. And these offices have the sort of the technical expertise, so that they're the ones who develop the topics, identify the best reviewers for your application, and then will eventually manage your project once it's underway. So finally, in the third box on the upper right is our DOE Chicago office. And this is the office that will actually award the grant to you and provide you with the funding. So they will get involved in the details of the final details of negotiating your grant, as well as providing you an account from which to draw down money. So again, there are three different offices here, and depending on the nature of the question you have, we've reiterated this before, might be who you ask. You can certainly always come to our office, and we will direct you to the right person, even if you have, for example, a technical question or question about the grant negotiation. One other thing I want to point out, even though we're going to try to present a lot of information today, if you do decide to work with and submit an application to one of the DOE program offices, and I'm showing here the website for our Office of Energy Efficiency or Renewable Energy, we would certainly encourage you to also go to those program offices directly. They contain a lot of information about the types of R&D they fund, maybe some recent conferences and technical reports that you can see what's going on in terms of the state of the art in those fields. And again, in addition, they have their own funding opportunity announcements that would be open to small businesses aside from just the SBIR and the STTR programs. So I'm just going to broadly cover the topic areas that are of interest to DOE. Now, we've already issued our first set of topics for the year, and so those will be much more detailed. Again, here I'm just going to give a brief overview of the different programs and the type of research they fund. The very detailed information about the specific topics we have out now, we would refer you to that topics document. So under clean energy, as I mentioned before, there are 4 offices working in this area. Again, the Office of Electricity Delivery and Energy Reliability. So they're interested in keeping the grid up and running, and also making sure the grid can handle some of the changes coming up, such as the introduction of renewable energy. So they will fund not only sort of the intelligence in the grid and the power transistors to help enable a more intelligent grid in the future, but also fund energy storage on the grid, which is different from energy storage, for example, that will be done in a vehicle. The second office there, the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, is the one actually a lot of our applicants are interested in. Again, the energy efficiency side, looking to make, has programs in fuel cell, in vehicles, including, batteries for vehicles, programs related to building efficiency in terms of HVAC systems and building envelopes. Are on the renewable energy side, again, the programs such as solar, wind, and water, and geothermal technologies would be funded by that office. The Office of Fossil Energy, Oil, Gas, and Coal would be interested in trying to drive those technologies to be cleaner in terms of how we extract them or how we utilize those forms of energy. And finally, the Office of Nuclear Energy, again, they are not so much focusing on looking at small businesses to leverage them for new nuclear reactor designs, but really assisting in developing new nuclear materials, involved in some of the sensor instrumentation, and also with the transport and storage of nuclear waste. The next slide, this is the science and engineering leadership part of the department. And again, there are 6 program offices here doing quite a large variety of research. We have the advanced scientific computing, very focused on high-performance computing and how we can leverage that capability. Also in terms of high-performance networking, in terms of moving around large amounts of data. The Basic Energy Science Office does a lot of work with scientific instrumentation in terms of better understanding, obtaining a better understanding of materials. They also do work on accelerator technologies, other data acquisition and processing needs as well. Our biological, we did get questions on whether DOE does fund work in the area of biology and medicine. I would say we don't do medical research. That's really the National Institutes of Health, where the focus of that is. But we do fund biological research that is related to missions in the agencies, such as bioenergy related. And in particular, this office is interested more in the genomic basis for improving future bioenergy solutions. The environmental component there does look at the effects of climate change, and particularly they fund a lot of work related to measuring changes in the environment, both at the atmosphere and subsurface. And finally, the last three offices there, both fusion, high energy, and nuclear physics, are all very physics driven. The last two looking at trying to get fundamental understanding of matter. The fusion energy trying to develop fusion as a potential commercial energy source in the fusion. So there are, again, technologies related to driving the physics associated with each of those offices. And finally, the third goal area of the Department of Energy related to nuclear security. Again, this is a small amount of our total funding, but we want to make sure you're aware of it. So these offices, both defense nuclear nonproliferation and environmental management, support topics related to detection of radiation, remote sensing of nuclear detonations, and then also cleanup-related activities such as remediation and deactivation and decommissioning. Okay, and then finally in this section, which we'll spend the most time on today, relates to the application and award process. So here we'll go into some of the timelines and what's involved in submitting an application for these programs. So this may look a little confusing at first, but the timelines here, we're showing oops, I have to apologize, had a little technical glitch here, hang on. The timeline here, the 0 point is the time at which you submit an application, and it's given in months. So starting with phase 1, we issue topics for our phase 1 solicitations about 3 months before the applications are due. And for the release 1 that's currently out, we issued those topics in mid-July. The funding opportunity announcement, or FOA, was issued just this week. That's done about 2 months before the applications are due. And finally, we wanted to point out that between now and the application due date for this first release, which is October 15th, there is a letter of intent requirement. I'll talk a little more about that later. The important thing to note right now is that is a requirement. If you don't submit a letter of intent, you won't be able to submit an application. The due date for that is September 3rd, so keep that in mind if you're intending to apply to this first Release 1 solicitation. Once your applications are submitted, there's about a 3-month process to do the review and make the award selections. Once that is complete, we provide you with about 6 weeks between being notified of receiving an award and the start of your budget period. And it's during that time that you will actually negotiate the final details of your budget with our Chicago office, and then start your phase 1, which is can be up to 9 months. Once you're finished with phase 1, you would apply for phase 2, and again, so only phase 1 awardees can apply for phase 2. We would issue that funding opportunity announcement a couple months before it's due. Again, we have a similar time periods for review and selection, and then to negotiate the award. And then you would start your phase 2 budget period, which would be up to 2 years in length. So this is actually fairly important. We don't issue all of our topics all at once. They are broken up into 2 groups, which we refer to as Release 1. in Release 2. Some of you were looking, for example, for renewable energy topics in our first release, wouldn't find them because our Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy participates in Release 2. So with Release 1 this year, I've listed the 6 different programs that are participating, and our topics are actually broken down by the offices that are supporting those topics. So again, in Release 1, it's primarily programs from our Office of Science and the Office of Defense, Nuclear, Nonproliferation, and that's the solicitation we just opened. Later this year, we will issue topics and a solicitation for Release 2, and those will involve the applied program shown there in addition to the Office of Fusion Energy Sciences. So keep that in mind when you're looking for topics. There are 2 different opportunities to apply. And again, here's our Phase 1 schedule for fiscal year 2014. And again, our typical schedule is, again, to issue topics. We will hold a topic webinar for those of you who missed those topic webinars. We have our program managers briefly discuss their topics, what they're looking for, what the scope of the topic is, and allow you to ask questions. That was held the week of July 22nd, and those were recorded and are available on our website. In fact, if you click the link at the bottom of the page, that will take you right to that page where those the links for those recordings are. Our funding opportunity announcement for this one, again, was just released earlier this week, and the full webinar we are holding today. And again, here are the other key dates in terms of when the letter of intent is due, when the full applications are due, and so on, and the similar dates for Release 2 if you're interested in applying for the next one. On the next slide, we have our Phase 2 schedule. And again, only our Phase 1 awardees can apply, so these would have been the folks who were awarded in FY14. A couple of things to note: we do allow you to switch programs at Phase 2. So if you were awarded an STTR and decided to switch to SBIR because the amount of collaboration you're having with the research institution is going down, you are able to do that. And we also want to point out that your Phase 1 final reports must be submitted with your Phase 2 application. In the next slide, I'll kind of step through, again, the different elements of applying. Again, we usually begin with our topics, which are issued first. This is a fairly lengthy document. An individual topic may be as long as 2 or 3 pages describing the technologies or breakthroughs of interest. We did also want to point out, we do always get questions about that. Can I talk to the DOE program managers? And yes, that is allowed. We are a granting program, not a contracting program, so there's no restrictions associated with contracting. So you may talk to them up until the time you submit the application. And please keep in mind that the discussions really should focus on the scope of the topic and whether the ideas that you have fit within that. And we encourage you to do that. We don't want you submitting an application, going to the trouble of developing an application that doesn't really fit with the intent of the topic. And as I mentioned before, that webinar, we did already hold those webinars for Release 1, and they are available if you want to listen to them. Here I'm showing an example topic. I apologize. This is one of our shorter topics, so I could fit it on one slide. And the important things are, as we do number each topic and have a subtopic in letters, and very important that anytime you submit an application to us or a letter of intent, you must specify the topic and subtopic. Up at the top, we do have a new topic header this year, and it tells you what's the maximum Phase 1 award amount, maximum Phase 2 award amount, and then also indicating whether we're accepting Phase 1 or fast-track applications. I'll talk about fast-track applications in just a minute, but this provides detail. So if you're submitting an application, always check this header to make sure you understand the award amounts. The award amounts do differ by topic. The other thing I want to point out is for every subtopic, again, you'll see the DOE program manager who's involved with that subtopic, and we, again, encourage you to contact them about that to clarify any questions you have about the scope of the topic. Every topic does have, or most every topic has another subtopic, and this is intent really to broaden the scope somewhat beyond the subtopics that are listed. Anything you submit here does still need to fit within the topic description above, at this point that's shown here. So we do ask that you read through that. It's not a catch-all for any idea. It still needs to fit, again, within the topic area. And finally, we do provide references. We do often get questions, technical questions, and our program managers often do take the time to find recent references of work done in the area to help bring you up to speed on the state of the art. So we would encourage you, to go through those in order to develop a more compelling application. One of the new things we introduced last year is what we call tech transfer opportunities. And this is an opportunity for you as a small business to transfer an invention made at a university or DOE National Lab to your business. So what you would get is an SBIR and STTR grant and an option to license the technology. I won't, take me a little more time to go through all the details of that. If you look at our topics document on the first 2 pages, it has a frequently asked questions section to get more information about that. From a high level, the important thing to note is most of our topics we're requesting some type of technology breakthrough. We're looking for your idea, to make that breakthrough. These, we basically have the labs and universities develop some of the new technologies. So the focus here is not necessarily on a new idea, but taking an invention and driving it to commercialization. So it's a very different emphasis in the type of application you would submit. On the next page, we have an example of a tech transfer opportunity. And again, these will be clearly labeled in the topic or subtopic as a tech transfer opportunity. And you'll also note that the research organization that's sponsoring the tech transfer opportunity will be listed. So here we're showing Pacific Northwest National Lab, and we'll provide some information, a link to the tech transfer opportunity, contact information to the personnel at the lab, in addition to a link to the patent or the patent application. So we definitely urge you to use that information if you're and contact the lab in this case if you're planning to submit an application. I would note in this particular case that this particular TTO, there is a teleconference next week with them to discuss any questions that potential applicants would have. So we would encourage you, actually I guess that's on the 27th, we would encourage you to take advantage of those opportunities to get more information. Again, the next step after our topics are issued are the issuing our funding opportunity announcement, which happened this week. You can get that either at our website or at grants.gov. And this really contains sort of all the rules and criteria associated with submitting an application. It is a fairly lengthy document, but especially if you're new to the applying for federal funding, we definitely encourage you to read through the document despite its length, so that you understand all the rules that apply to submitting an application. Again, with regard to DOE program managers, you can communicate with them, and you can also communicate with our office any general questions about submitting an application or any issues you are having with submitting your application. The first thing you'll want to do, and this is again for this first release for the year, is due on September 3rd, is develop a letter of intent. And as I mentioned before, this is a requirement. If you don't submit a letter of intent, you won't be able to submit an application. And this is a fairly short document. The information we're showing on the right, the title, the topic and subtopic, and the key piece of this is really the abstract. And we're not really using this to review your potential application. What we're doing is using this information to identify reviewers, so that when your application does come in, we can quickly move forward with the review process. So keep in mind the abstract is not proprietary. You should not submit any proprietary information in that. We will, if the program managers will review your abstract when they're trying to identify reviewers, and if they find that what you're submitting, the idea you're submitting, does not appear to fit within the topic that they had issued, we will send you a letter indicating that it appears to be non-responsive. Now, this does not in any way prevent you from submitting an application, but we would encourage you either to read the topic and subtopic again to make sure you understand the scope of it, or contact the program manager to make sure you understand the scope. Again, this is another thing we're trying to do so that you don't sort of blindly submit a full application that's not what we refer to as responsive to the topic. The other thing I want to point out is that we do have limits on the number of letters of intent and applications that you can submit. So you can only submit 10 for a given solicitation, phase 1 solicitation. We do have 2 a year, so that means you could, in principle, submit 20, phase 1 applications each fiscal year. In terms of how you submit a letter of intent, you will actually do this through an online system here at the Department of Energy, which we refer to as PAMS. And there's more information about how to do this by just going to the PAMS website, and there are very detailed instructions in the funding opportunity announcement that will step you through that. So that's something you do want to go to our PAMS. I wouldn't encourage you to create an account on September 3rd. I would encourage you to get there in advance to at least get an account in PAMS before you submit the letter of intent. On the next slide, we'll start discussing submitting an application. And one of the things I want to point out is that we do use grants.gov. This is used by many federal agencies that issue grants. And it is a 3-step process that you'll have to go through in order to submit an application to grants.gov. And unfortunately, some of these steps actually may take you a couple of weeks. Since the applications are due in mid-October, if you're planning to submit to that, we would encourage you to start right away with obtaining a DUNS number, do your SAM registration. This is the System for Award Management, so anybody trying to get an award from the federal government must do that registration. And then the grants.gov registration in order to submit your application. So that's, again, something to keep in mind, is try to get some of the sort of this preliminary work out of the way early so that when you're finally submitting your application, you're not getting bogged down or delayed by these things.
And Manny, I would point out to everybody listening in that when you do receive the recorded link or you click on this webinar from our website, all of the links that you can see here will be active, so you can click on those directly from the actual recorded webinar.
Okay, thanks, Chris. And in terms of actually submitting your application to grants.gov, what you'll do is actually download an application package. This is really a large PDF document. Some parts you will fill in information. You will just type information in the fields. But most of the important information, such as your proposal, background information, on your key personnel, you will just be attaching those, again, as PDF documents. Sorry, I had a little technical glitch here. And so as you looking for assistance, particularly those who have never applied to our program before and filling this out, the thing that you want to look at is our topic document, the funding opportunity announcement itself, and we also have a separate document, which is really instructions for filling out a phase 1 application, and all of these documents can be found on our website. In terms of the documents or the part of the application parts of the application you will submit, probably the most important is just your project narrative or your proposal. I did want to point out we do have page and word limits. We are looking for people to develop new ideas, but in terms of providing a timely review, we do limit the number of pages and words in this part of the application. The other key documents would be the budget and a budget justification that explains the budget, your key personnel, your commercialization plan. We do want to point out that we do require with phase 1 a phase 1 commercialization plan, and with phase 2 a much more detailed commercialization plan, and instructions for those can be found in the funding opportunity announcement. And finally, there's an SBIR STTR information form. These are not all the documents, but the key documents that make up your application. We like to tell people what are the key errors that applicants that we find from applicants. Some of these are fairly important errors that would actually prevent us from even reviewing your application and moving forward with it. So probably the first one is this System for Award Management, or SAM, registration. Some people choose to wait till the last minute to go in and either update it or do it, and then they find out that the registration process will take another week to complete, and therefore they aren't able to meet the grants.gov deadline. So again, this is one of the registration processes I mentioned earlier. Get that out of the way early. Don't work on the technical idea and try to do all this administrative details at the end. The Phase 1 commercialization plan was new a couple years ago. I think we've seen the numbers and the percentage complying with this go up, but we still have a number of people who are forgetting to submit this. If you forget to submit it, we will have to decline you without review. It needs only to be about a couple-page document. There is a field on the grants.gov for commercialization plans for Phase 2. Unfortunately, it doesn't accept the Phase 1 commercialization plan, so you have to put it in a different field, labeled here Field 12. But just keep that in mind. Remember to submit that with your Phase 1 application. And also, we also recently last year put in word and page limitations for your project narrative or proposal. Please comply with those. We do believe you can get the essential ideas across, within those word and page limits. Other things to pay attention to is the level of effort requirement. I'll talk a little more about what these requirements are, but there's certain requirements that the business must do a certain percentage of the R&D, and in the case of an STTR, the research institution must do a certain percentage. We do provide a spreadsheet to allow you to calculate that accurately, and we encourage you to do that and use the level of effort worksheet we provide. And the final is most of you will include proprietary information with your application, and it's very important that you mark that. So that will allow us to protect your data, protect your proprietary information, so that we know which parts are proprietary. So that the instructions for that are in the funding opportunity announcement. So please do pay attention to that. I've been talking a lot, and I basically talking about SBIR and STTR as if they're the same program, and for the most part they are similar, but there are two really important differences. One is related to the level of effort. Again, so for an SBIR, the small business must do 2/3 or 67% of the R&D in Phase 1, and must do 50% in Phase 2. The STTR level of effort requirements are different. Because you're working with a research institution, you must do 40% of the R&D in Phases 1 and 2, and the research institution must do 30% in Phase 1 and 2. Now, it's actually possible to meet both of the requirements for SBIR and STTR, and many of the folks who decide to apply for STTR actually do submit to both programs simultaneously. So we did want to make you aware that with DOE, since we use the same topics for SBIR and STTR, you can submit to both programs with one application. The other key difference between SBIR and STTR that I mentioned previously is that the principal investigator for the STTR can come from the research institution, and that is unique to STTR. For SBIR, the principal investigator must be principally employed by the small business. And again, on the next slide, again, either STTR or SBIR, you can collaborate with a research institution. Thing I would point out for STTR that we do require an agreement that covers the commercialization and property rights. So that must be in place before you get your award. So we want you to be aware, if you decide to submit to an STTR, of that requirement. And we do provide a model agreement for you to use to help you with the negotiation. SBIR, there's no restrictions on subcontracting to a research institution. In the past, there had been a waiver requirement if you decided to collaborate with a federal lab on an SBIR, but that's been eliminated. I mentioned before there are two types of applications you can submit to our Phase 1 funding opportunity announcement, either a Phase 1 or a fast track. And a fast track application is actually a combined Phase 1, Phase 2 application. So you would be applying for funding for both the initial 9-month phase 1 and the 24-month, up to a 24-month phase 2. The important thing here is your project proposal is not 2, it's actually a single proposal narrative that would cover the entire period. Similarly with your budget, would cover all both phase 1 and phase 2 periods. The commercialization plan, you would only need to submit the more detailed phase 2 commercialization plan. And on the next slide, I just want to discuss why we have this application. Our normal phase 1 awardees, when they complete their phase 1, submit the phase 2 application. And there's about a 5-month time window between when their phase 1 grant ends and the phase 2 starts. So there is a funding gap, which for some small businesses is not a challenge as people move between projects, but certainly for some companies like startups, this is a bigger challenge. So the fast track process essentially eliminates that gap. We would also want to point out that fast track is not for everybody, however, because a lot of our phase 1 research is high risk, and people will try new ideas and maybe multiple different paths on solving the problem. So the phase 2 proposal is not very clear until they complete phase 1. So in those cases, we would probably not encourage you to submit a fast track application. Again, because of the emphasis in phase 2 on commercialization, if you don't have the people now in place to assist with the developing a solid commercialization plan for phase 2, that may also be a limitation that would prevent you from submitting a fast track application. In the fast track process, what you would do to move from phase 1 to phase 2 is at the end of the 7th month of your 9-month phase 1, you would submit your phase 2, your continuation application to move into phase 2. And similarly, a normal phase 2 budget period has 2 one-year periods, and at the 9th month of your first year, you would also submit a continuation to move into your 2nd year. And DOE program managers will review those continue application and make a recommendation as to whether to continue the research. The other thing we want to point out is that you cannot submit to both phase 1 and fast track with essentially the same idea. We do ask you that you pick one or the other. And again, in terms of, we get questions about how many fast tracks we get and how many will be awarded. We can report on last year where about 4% of the applications received were for fast track. And we'll show the award and application statistics in just a few slides, but they had similar award rates. And not all topics will necessarily accept fast track applications. I mentioned that header before, and I would encourage you to look at those headers. I believe for release 1 we have all the topics accepting fast track, but that will probably not be the case in release 2. So in terms of what happens when you submit an application, what do we do in terms of review? We go through a peer review process. We use at least 3 technical reviewers. And if for a phase 2 application, we also have a commercial reviewer look at the commercialization plan. And all of those reviews look at these 3 review criteria that are listed below, which is really the strength of your idea, the ability of your team, to execute, and finally, what's the impact if you are successful. I would say after we do make an award decision whether to move forward or not with your application, and you will receive that within 90 days of the application deadline, we will provide reviewer comments to you. And for those folks who have applied in the past and have not been successful, really this is probably the most useful source of correcting or amending your proposal to submit it again in the future. We normally do not have verbal debriefings or things like that because of the volume of applications we get under this program. But do take advantage of these reviewer comments to improve your application. In terms of who we use for reviewers, here's the breakdown of the typical reviewer affiliation. As you can see, we make good use of the DOE National Labs staff as reviewers, as well as university personnel. and also private sector and some government employees as well. And keep in mind that the reviewers do acknowledge they don't have a conflict of interest in reviewing your application, and also acknowledge they will keep your application information confidential. What are your chances of winning? Again, that's a very popular question. So for phase one, sort of the pie chart shows the distribution there. One of the things we'll point out is that we will let you know sort of which category you fall in, and we have roughly 4 categories here. One is, again, 14% of the phase ones were awarded last year. Another 14% were recommended for funding but not awarded. And that just reflects the fact we do have many high-quality applications, and we do have a limited, budgets for these programs. So not all of the high-quality applications do get funded. About 2/3 of the phase one applications are not recommended for funding based, on the reviews that they received. And finally, about 6% are declined without review, and those are for reasons largely related to the errors that I mentioned on the previous slide. The good news, I think, because we do allow you to talk to the DOE program managers, we do have topic webinars, and we do give you feedback on your letters of intent, we are trying to decrease those that are declined without review. And that number in the past has been about 15%, so we are pleased to see that number go down to 6%, although we would certainly like to see it even lower. The fast track applications, as I mentioned, only a small percentage last year came in under fast track. The award percent was similar at 11%. Another 10% were recommended for funding but not awarded. And again, about 70% were not recommended for funding, again with another small percentage declined without review. We operate our phase 2 program very differently because only our phase 1 awardees can apply. It's not our intent to do another level of very severe screening. We try to award all the meritorious phase 2 applications that come in. So in this case, if you do submit for phase 2, our history has been about half of those who submit are awarded. You can see in this case there are about another 9% that were not awarded, although recommended for funding, and another 43% who were not recommended for funding by the program manager after looking at the proposal and the reviewer comments. And finally, another important I think aspect of the program is that as a first-time applicant, or if you've applied in the past and haven't been successful, that we did want to point out. For example, if you look at 2013, 25% of the awardees for phase 1 were first-time applicants that had never applied to our programs before. So yes, it's certainly you are able to win the first time. There's another group there we've indicated all the way up to 42%. So there are another group who have applied in the past who are first-time awardees but had prior applications. So in total, first-time awardees, either first-time applicants or second or third-time applicants, represent 42% of our winners from last year. Okay, and I think we're winding down here. So once you are selected for award, as we mentioned before, you will work with our Chicago office to complete the negotiation, and your grant would start about 6 weeks later. You do have to, they will make requests and, to discuss or clarify elements of your budget in terms of either salaries or employment or possibly your overhead rates. Please respond to them in a timely fashion so that, you can get your funding within 6 weeks. And do pay attention to the, the reporting requirements and the terms and conditions as relate to intellectual property. Finally, I do want to point out that we do provide assistance, commercialization assistance to phase 1 or phase 2 awardees. And this assistance is provided by a contractor, Dawnbreaker. We do provide both phase 1 and phase 2 assistance. In phase 1, most of our focus is on the helping you develop your phase 2 commercialization plan. And in phase 2, there are a whole set of different options to help you with a variety of things, from market research to developing marketing tools, and even to assistance with licensing or identifying commercialization partners. The link provided there will give some more details about that assistance. With reauthorization, we do allow you to provide your own vendor, again, and include that with your application. The amount that you can use for commercialization assistance is $5,000 for Phase 1 and $5,000 per year in Phase 2. But you do need to submit that in advance with your application. You can't come back after you received an award to identify that vendor. So that wraps up, the bulk of the presentation with regard to, the program and the timelines and how to apply. I just have a short section here at the end. Again, there is been placed a great emphasis on, eliminating fraud, waste, and abuse, really in all federal programs, but particularly in the SBIR and STTR programs. I'm not going to go through these slides. I would encourage you, when you go through, if you have some concerns about the types of issues that can occur and why people might, run into trouble. I think the thing I would point out is probably the most important thing you need to pay attention to is the question that people have: can I submit, essentially the same application to different agencies, different SBIR programs? And the answer to that is yes, but you must be very careful that you only accept one of those awards. You cannot get funded to do basically the essentially same research from two different agencies or two different programs. If you do that, and the inspector generals of the different agencies look very closely at that, and in fact will look through the awards that are made to make sure that isn't happening. And if you are caught, you will be prosecuted for wrongdoing. So very important to pay attention to that. If you have any questions about that, please let us know. Again, there are some details in the slides here, but in the interest of time and getting to your questions, we are going to skip through that. And we do provide a link here to our Inspector General if you do have any questions for them or wish to report fraud, waste, and abuse that you're aware of. So we're going to stop now for questions. I think we do have plenty of time, hopefully at least 15 minutes to half an hour perhaps, so my voice runs out. And then we'll go from there. So I think, Chris, you've gotten quite a few come in during the webinar, and you want to tee them up?
Yes, I'm going to go ahead and tee some of these up, and we do have quite a few questions, and they do continue to come in, and I'll try to provide these in a coherent way as possible. There's one question here that I'm going to start with. What happens if more than one of your applications are accepted? If you submit two applications to the program, are you able to work on more than one project? Must you choose between the two, or can you work on one now and then the other after you finish the first?
Okay, so that's a good question. So again, we do allow you to submit up to 10 applications. And again, we do request that those applications be unique to us. So you shouldn't be submitting the same application to different topics. And so if you do submit unique applications, you can be awarded for them and work on them. But you will be required to work on them concurrently. You won't be able to delay one and ask to have that one awarded at a later date. So that is a requirement. We do, just so you understand the background for that, all the Phase 1s who are awarded will go compete against each other for Phase 2 awards. And so you will stay with your same Phase 1 group when you compete for Phase 2. So we don't have we don't allow you to delay or shift the time for that.
Can a university student employed part-time by the startup company qualify as a PI?
For an SBIR award, the answer is no. You have to be principally employed, and that means that that's your primary place of employment. You're doing it, in our definition, you work there at least 20 hours a week, and you don't work more than 19 hours a week somewhere else. Okay? We know some people are working essentially 2 full-time jobs or things like that. But from our definition, you need to have a primary place of employment, and for SBIR, that needs to be the small business. Now for STTR, as I mentioned, that is different. So you can be the student, if they're primarily employed at the university, could be the PI on an STTR grant. Now keep in mind that the small business is still the primary awardee, and they are responsible for the overall management of the grant. So I'll end there. So we do get a lot of questions about the employment. If you have any others, please let us know. And as I want to put up on the questions today, it is very likely we won't get to all of your questions. But if you do have some that aren't answered today, we do have the phone number and our email address up there, and we will try to get back to you with those questions that aren't answered, so in case you don't get through during the webinar.
Well, Manny, what is the DOE response to a letter of intent? How long does that take once an LOI is submitted to get a response?
We will try to get the answer back to you within 2 to 3 weeks. I don't have I think 2 weeks is the time frame. We do ask the managers to start looking at the reviewers and scan through your abstracts to do that. It's during that time that they are doing that. So you should hear soon. And again, the intent, if it appears to be non-responsive, is so that you don't spend a lot of time developing the application.
Is there a restriction on the number of SBIR applications a single PI can submit? And I'm assuming that is not the small business submitting it.
Yeah, so for PI, no, we do recognize that some other agencies, such as NSF, have both business and PI limitations. Our limitation of 10 applications per funding opportunity announcement does not put any further limits on the PI. So for one given business, a PI in principle could submit 10 applications.
Can a startup company manager negotiate on behalf of the PI? Or would that be
not really
small
sure
business?
what you're, again, negotiating.
Again,
typically when you submit an application to us, we just want to clarify, you would have two key individuals. One is the business official, and the other is the principal investigator. And we work with both of those people depending on the nature of the issue. If there are issues that come up in the application relative to the technical content, we would typically go back to the principal investigator. If there are questions related to the application, maybe overhead rates and things like that, we might go to the business official. So we use both of those contacts at the business when when addressing questions back to you.
For new companies, does incorporation need to be complete by time of application? And does DOE have a preference as to type of the small business incorporation, like an LLC versus some other type of incorporated entity?
The eligibility requirements that we have in our funding opportunity announcement must be met at time of award. So if you look at our timelines, we mentioned it's typically about 6 weeks after we notify you that you've received an award that your grant would start. And it's really at that time you absolutely must meet the eligibility requirement. We do not have any preference in terms of how you set up your small business, whether a sole proprietor, LLC, or an incorporated small business.
Can you give examples of a typical research institution?
Any university, that does research, and then any federal laboratory, like a DOE national lab, like Brookhaven National Lab, or even other labs from other agencies.
Do you need to have federally approved rates?
No. Again, many of you may be submitting and actually never have worked with the federal government before. And at some point after working with the federal government, you will be audited to determine those rates. But initially, especially if you've never applied to the federal government, you won't have any rates. And you will have to develop your own, especially if you're a startup, your own indirect rates and submit those with your application. Okay,
here's one. I've noticed that the SBIR program was originally created in part to help women-owned companies. I have a service-disabled, veteran-owned small business. Is there any advantage to being this, a service-disabled, veteran-owned small business with the SBIR, STTR programs?
Although we, do outreach to try to encourage as many, different types of small businesses to apply, the program is merit-based, and the competition is really based on the quality of the application as they relate to the 3 criteria. So no preference or set-aside is given to, with regard to minority ownership, women ownership, or the disabled veteran status.
If after the Phase 1 work has been successfully completed but found not technically viable, or it was found technically viable, we find that the market for our product was significantly smaller than anticipated. Will not pursuing a Phase 2 follow-on award funding hurt our future chances at award for SBIR funding for other projects?
Absolutely not. So again, we look to you, and that's the whole purpose of Phase 1. It's intended to be risk. We don't expect all the Phase 1 awardees to apply, and we certainly don't hold that against you. We'd actually appreciate that you're honest enough to do the assessment and not apply. As I've shown, some of our Phase 2s do apply and are not recommended for funding, probably based on their ability to execute in Phase 1 and what they were not being able to do what they expected to achieve. So that certainly is not an issue.
Does the Department of Energy require the PI to be employed by the small business during application period or just during the actual project work after funding?
Yeah, again, our eligibility requirements start at time of award. Once you are working with our Chicago office, in fact, they will require you to sign a certification, and you will certify both with regard to your small business eligibility and the PI eligibility. So at that time, you will need to certify, and again, it's over the period of performance of the grant.
Okay. Do you encourage resubmission of previously submitted proposals that may not have been funded? If so, will they be given a better rating, considering that the questions that may have been brought up during the review were answered or corrected?
We certainly can't advise in advance what your rating would be in terms of the recommendation for funding, a year in advance. A lot of that may reflect also the level of competition and things like that. So we do encourage people to improve things. And as I mentioned, some of you may fall in a category where you're recommended for funding and not awarded. So there was nothing fundamentally wrong with your application, and so we certainly would encourage those folks to possibly even further strengthen it and resubmit. For those who were not recommended for funding, yes, if they can address the issues identified by the reviewers to move into the category of being recommended for funding, we certainly welcome that.
Are there templates available for SBIR proposals?
If you're looking for something in the way of a pre-filled application, we really don't have anything like that. I would say that the application package itself is a template. It does tell you where to type in certain information and then where to attach other information. So we would encourage you just to go ahead and download the package and scan through it to look at the documents you need to fill out.
Okay, and you may have, can award funds be used to pay for patent fees?
There is for Phase 1, the answer to that is no. And again, there is a fee that you will include in your budget. And again, that's essentially think of as your profit, from performing the grant. And again, you are free to use that, for any purpose you wish at the company. In Phase 2, we do allow some small part of your grant award to be used toward patent costs. So that'd be up to $10,000 during your Phase 2 award.
It appears that
these awards are primarily for R&D, so that's the bulk, the vast bulk of your dollars should be directed at that.
Okay. Some program managers did not attend the topics webinars you held earlier. What can we do to ensure that our letters of intent are relevant in those topics if our calls are not returned?
Again, if you missed the topic webinar, I would encourage you to listen to them because they're recorded. Again, try to reach out to the program managers. We realize that because of their schedules and vacations this time of year, you may not be able to get responses in a timely fashion. Go ahead and submit your LOI, and again, if it does appear to be non-responsive, you will get feedback from us.
Okay. On average, does each topic receive a Phase 2 award?
Yeah, we do get a lot of questions about how many awards are made by topic and subtopic. Unfortunately, there's no simple answer to that because it really does depend on the quality of the applications we receive under each topic and subtopic. In many cases, we may see a large number of high quality, in which case that topic may actually receive more awards. and other topics may not get any high quality, and we will have no awards made under that topic. So there's no quota or expectation. So unfortunately, we can't, tell you which ones have the high success rates kind of in advance.
Is there any exclusivity in any way related to TTO licenses, Technology Transfer Opportunity licenses?
Yeah, it's our intention with the tech transfer opportunities to only give out one award for each of those tech transfer opportunities. As is mentioned in the discussion section, you will get an option where you will have exclusivity in the field of use. So that will be provided to you. And again, that's just an option, not a license. You will need to convert that to a license by demonstrating progress on the R&D.
Okay. In a fast track award, if phase 1 is achieved early, can we accelerate into phase 2 ahead of schedule?
That's a good question. Actually, we haven't really encountered that previously. Again, normally we would put you, on a schedule as to when your continuation applications are due and the budget period. That would have to be a very unique case, and we would need to see some justification for doing that. But in general, we would prefer you to, to stay to what you had planned. Again, we don't want to waste the government's money. So if there are activities that you need to, you feel that you've really completed the phase 1 scope of the phase 1, just please notify us, and we would work with you.
In terms of word count on the proposals, do you use Microsoft Word count, or do you have some other different word count metric?
Yeah, again, we would just use the kind of the standard word counts that are done in applications like Word.
Can the same company submit an SBIR STTR application for both Release 1 and Release 2 in the same fiscal year?
Yes, of course you can submit up to 10 applications to Release 1 and up to another 10 for Release 2.
Do we need to be already registered with SAM and grants.gov, et cetera, before a letter of intent deadline, or only before the full application due date?
And that's only for the full application due date. The letter of intent, as I mentioned before, will come into the Department of Energy's PAM system. And we do encourage you to go ahead and create an account there if you haven't already gotten one, don't already have one, so you can submit that in time.
Is it permissible to reorganize our company between application and award time? Will that affect our company if we are selected for an award?
As long as you don't, become ineligible as a result of the reorganization. If there's an acquisition, you're no longer a small business, or if you have majority VC ownership or other issues that would preclude you from being eligible, that would be an issue. Again, I would go ahead and construct your application with the keeping in mind the structure of the company at the time of award.
Okay, during phase 1, you note that we are allowed to request $5,000 for commercialization assistance using a provider of our choice. Is extra money available for fast track applicants, and if so, how much?
Yeah, and again, fast track is no different than our regular phase 1 and phase 2 amounts for commercialization assistance. Because it's combined phase 1 and phase 2, it would allow you to use $5,000 during the phase 1 portion and $5,000 per year in phase 2. So your total application could have up to $15,000 for commercialization assistance for your own vendor.
Mm-hmm. Can work from an earlier phase 1 award be extended to resubmit as another phase 1 award?
Sorry, just repeat that again.
Can work from an earlier phase 1 be extended to resubmit as another phase 1?
Yeah, as long as the
R&D
that's proposed fits within the topic and subtopic, we don't really penalize you from doing research in the past in that area. In fact, it's usually to your advantage so that you understand what the challenges are.
Mm-hmm. Question, do both SBIR and STTR have the same 51% U.S. ownership rule?
Yes.
And what if a research institution we work with is U.S.-based? Can we count their involvement into the ownership criteria somehow?
Absolutely no. The ownership criteria refers to the small business. So keep in mind, this is a small business program. Even if you have some subcontracts or subawards, those are handled by the small business. All the award money goes to the small business, and they farm that out to their collaborators.
Okay. You may have answered part of this. Typically, what percentage of Phase 1s convert to Phase 2? I believe you said from Phase 1 award, there's roughly a 50% conversion rate to Phase 2. Do you set up a separate
so just
budget?
to clarify, so of the Phase 1 award winners, typically about 90% of them apply for Phase 2. As I mentioned before, and as people have noted, the Phase 1 research doesn't always work out. So of the 90% who do apply, about half of those are funded.
Okay. It appears DOE is splitting topics into a spring and fall solicitation. Will there be approximately the same number of topics and funding available for each solicitation?
The funding amounts will vary depending on which DOE programs are participating. Typically, the Release 1 has the larger amount of funding because of the budgets, the SBIR and STTR budgets of those programs of those combined programs are larger. So I would say the split is probably maybe 60-40 or 2/3, 1/3, something like that. So Release 1 does have the larger total amount of funding.
Okay. Do you have any advice in terms of criteria that we should take into consideration when deciding which program we should pursue, SBIR versus STTR?
Again, that's really completely up to you. So you really need to look at what you're proposing to do and what makes the most sense. So again, there can be a variety of issues here. I mean, you may have licensed some technology from a university and you're trying to use that to meet the requirements. In that case, it certainly makes a lot of sense to leverage the expertise and talent of the university that maybe developed the IP in your application, so it would make a lot of sense to do an STTR. There's really they're two independent programs, and they have two independent, sets of funding. We don't sort of bias one either way. If you're kind of asking, is my chance of success higher in one program or the other? That can vary year to year, but they are approximately in the same range. If you are able to meet the eligibility criteria for both, the level of effort requirement for both, then you could actually submit to both. And as I mentioned, a lot of our applicants who choose to submit to STTR use the both.
Manny, what is the, in terms of evaluating a fast-track Phase 1 versus a regular Phase 1, what is the difference in emphasis on commercialization?
Yeah, so the fast-track Phase 1 will contain a Phase 2 commercialization plan. And that is a much more detailed commercialization plan, which will be sent out for external review, independently. In Phase 1, we do not do an independent review of the commercialization plan. We're looking for some very basic information related to your projected revenues and to see that you have some idea what your plans are. In Phase 2, it's a much more detailed plan, so that does get more scrutiny in the review criteria.
Okay. This is our first time writing a grant, and we would likely need assistance from personnel experienced with writing grants. Do you have any references that are helpful in assisting in first-time grant writers?
We don't really recommend, as the government, we aren't really in the business of sort of recommending people you should go to. However, depending on your state, many states do have programs to assist with SBIR and STTR applications. They may call it Phase 0 assistance, and they may help you, write the grant as well as maybe even have an initial review of the grant to help strengthen it. So we look at your state resources. There are organizations called state small business development centers in most, if not all, states, and they may be able to point you to programs like that. There are also private consultants that are available. If you go to any of the national SBIR conferences, some of those types of consultants will be there and can offer those services. Again, those would typically be a fee associated with those. Some of the state programs, are funded by the state and would be at no cost to you.
I was informed that in an effort to maintain fair treatment across the board, DOE does not provide individual phone calls to applicants who apply to discuss their potential proposals. Is this true? Am I only limited to communication with topic authors by email?
We use email just because that is the strong preference of our topic managers. Many of them are on travel or at conferences, and email is really the most convenient way to reach them. So there is no restriction against speaking by telephone, and if you are able to reach them or if they contact you by phone to discuss it further, that is allowed and permissible. But I think in terms of convenience, we would recommend the email approach.
How often are topics repeated in a solicitation?
Let me just add to that last question. Again, that's the approach that we use with the DOE, SBIR, and STTR programs. Some of the programs, when you're applying for different funding, may have different rules. And particularly for contracts, you may not be able to talk to them at all. So just the rules that are associated with whether you're allowed to talk to somebody depend on the program that you're referring to. So let me just caution you that some program managers may often refer to the normal way of doing business in their programs. But for STTR and SBIR here in DOE, that is allowed.
Okay. And Manny, we have time for just a few more questions here. I don't want to go too far past here, but we do have a lot of good questions and a lot of folks still online. If multiple Phase 1 awards per topic are made, is only one Phase 2 proposal invited to submit, or are all the Phase 1 awardees invited to submit to for a Phase 2 proposal?
Yeah, we do no invitations to Phase 2. All Phase 1 awardees are eligible to submit for Phase 2. And again, as I said before, a lot of the award decisions are really based on the quality of the work that's being done. And so there's no a priori, we will only award one Phase 2 in this topic. That really does depend on the quality of applications across all the topics. But yeah, no, we do not have an invitation policy, and all Phase 1s are encouraged to apply.
So how many awards per Phase 1 topic are typically made?
Oh, gee, that's probably on the order of 2 to 3, somewhere in that range. But like I said, the distribution could be quite variable. It can be 0, it could be 5 or 6. I did notice that and some topics will have lots of subtopics, and you might expect to see more awards under those. So there really is no easy rule for that.
Okay. And here's the last question, Manny, that I'll read to you here. Understand that no cost sharing is required. So at what rates can we charge the project? Commercial rates, internal cost only, cost plus?
I'm not really sure what again, what we're looking for is that you're actually charging for what you're actually expending. Now, how you account for that, in your business in terms of what's direct, what's indirect, and other things, I'm not really sure what you're getting at there. So maybe let's go ahead and take just a few more questions, Chris, if we can go to 3:30. I think I did see a few more actually good questions up.
All right.
You won't drop off.
Let's pull some here. Last year, one of our proposals was among those recommended for funding, but all of the competitive proposals was not funded. Not all of the proposals were funded. This one was recommended for funding, but there was not enough money to fund it. So they are going to resubmit. If we resubmit, is there any way that we can mention that last year this proposal was recommended for funding? They're looking for recognition of some sort.
You're certainly free to to indicate that this proposal has been submitted previously. But we have to treat each one as a new application, and we'll go out for review. And the ultimate recommendation will be based on that new review. I mean, technology does change, and new things happen, and things that might have been a little more innovative last year, maybe some advances have been made. So every year, we treat them as new. There is no leg up from a previous submission.
Okay. And to clarify, didn't one of your previous slides mention that commerciality was now a larger part of the SBIR program?
Yeah, the emphasis on commercialization has gone up within the SBIR and STTR programs compared to certainly the early years. So Congress is looking for people not to take these R&D awards just to supplement the R&D budgets in their small businesses. They're really looking for these R&D to translate into commercial products and services. Now, having said that, we realize that a lot of the things that we fund, the private sector doesn't fund because they may be very high risk. They may be a little further out in time. So we're not trying to discourage you from taking risk. So keep that in mind. We don't expect certainly a majority of them to commercialize. I would say that just given the nature of the work, that only a minority will achieve commercial success. But we do expect that each one that is submitted has the potential to be commercially successful.
Okay, and in the STTR program, does the technology have to exist at the university, or can it be developed elsewhere?
Now, the STTR program, I think the initial intent, since it's called Small Business Technology Transfer, was that the research institution would be transferring technology to the small business. However, the program has evolved. It really allows you to use any collaboration with a research institution independent of where the intellectual property was developed. So it could have been done at the business, it could have been done at the university, or even coming from a third party.
Can we submit more than one application within a subtopic?
Yes, that is allowed. They should be different applications. I mean,
okay.
Clearly different so that we don't confuse them. Sometimes we do get applications that look almost identical, and we consider them duplicates. So please clarify and make sure that the titles and the information distinguishes them.
How do I make an unsolicited proposal for a grant to the DOE?
If you just Google DOE unsolicited proposal, you will find the link to that. That's probably the fastest way that I can tell you to get to that.
All right, and this is our last question. I've dealt with the DoD, SBIR, and one had to be sponsored by a service, such as the Army or Navy, I guess. Does DOE require a sponsor, or can a company submit a topic directly to the DOE?
Now, there are two separate questions there. So, one, we don't require a sponsor. Again, we are open to any small business who can address the technology needs described, in our topics. In terms of submitting a topic, that's a broader question that relates. One of the questions we often get is the invention I have in mind doesn't fit with your topics. How can I submit my idea? And so if you don't fit in our topics, then you really can't submit it. So I just want to make that clear. I mean, you can submit it, but it will probably be found non-responsive. What we encourage people to do is to look at our topics and talk to our topic managers. If it's outside the scope of their topic, so let's pick a topic like, say, solar energy. If you have some very different way of doing things that is not captured in their topic, then I would encourage you to talk to the topic manager. Then perhaps in future years they can broaden their topic to include some very different approaches that you have mentioned. That's really the primary way we have of trying to identify new topic areas. I mean, our program managers do stay on top of the field. They do fund R&D at small businesses, at universities, national labs, large corporations. So they see what's happening in the field, and they try to design their topics, in anticipation of where they think, some innovation is needed. Of course, they don't see everything, and so if you have those ideas, feeding it to them allows them to, sort of broaden their horizons a little, and perhaps broaden the topics in SBIR to accommodate that. related to that, we do have this other subtopic for most of our topics, which is an attempt to do that, but it's still relatively narrow in scope since it must fit within the topic. I did see a question pop up about, well, how many awards are made under the other subtopic? And in the past few years, we have received about 11% of the applications there. Somewhere between 6 and 9% of the awards go out under the other subtopic. So it's not just there, for show. We do make awards under the other subtopic.
And one last simple question. Will the Office of Fossil Energy be participating in fiscal year 2014? They do not appear in Release 1.
The answer is yes, and they'll be in Release 2. I did have an earlier slide which showed which release the different programs participate in. So please do keep that in mind. And this sometimes does change year to year. So we did have one office, for example, our Fusion Energy office, which was in Release 1 last year, switched to Release 2 this year. So it doesn't always say fixed year to year, so make sure you look at each announcement to see who is participating if you tend to align with one of the programs.
Manny, let's just do this last question. Does the PI need to be a U.S. citizen?
The answer to that is no, but you do need to be legally empowered to work in the United States, which is related to, I saw another question we got, which is, I don't mention it explicitly, but all the R&D performed under SBIR and STTR programs must be performed in the United States. So you can have other subcontractors who might be, say, foreign-owned or things like that, but all the research must be done in the United States.
Okay.
So I guess did you have any more?
No, we do have more questions, but unfortunately we have gone over our time here, and I'm not quite sure how long we will stay connected, so we do need to wrap up.
Okay, so as I mentioned at the very beginning, if your question was not answered, please go ahead and submit it to the email address that's shown on this slide, or you can also call it in. Again, if everyone calls it at the same time, you probably won't get through. So email, again, is convenient, and make sure you'll get a reply. So
yeah, your best bet is to go ahead and submit these questions as you did similar to your registration. We'll need an email address. So if you email this to you, we more than likely can get an answer back to you fairly quickly. But we did have a lot of good questions that were submitted as part of this. And so we encourage you to go and get on our mailing list, and that way you'll be aware of future webinars. And following this, as soon as I click this webinar, turn it off, it's going to send you a survey to complete. It's very short and simple. We do desire your feedback, even if it's just a couple words. We'd like to know what you liked or what you didn't like about this and what we can do to improve it. So thank you very much for attending today's webinar, and we look forward to participating in your participation in doing these in the future. Manny?
All right. Again, thanks, everybody. Sorry it went a little long, but hopefully it was useful.
Good. All right. Thank you all. This concludes our webinar.